Welcome back to the Church Resource, where we talk about all the best resources for church leaders and lay people. I'm with Dr. Chris Respass, and I am your congenial host,
Oh, my goodness.
Lucas Pinckard.
All right, come on.
I want to say that was my word of the day, but it's not. It's just...
Just claim it. Claim it.
I just wanted to sound smart.
Oh,
I'm looking at your bespectacled self, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use the word congenial today.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So today we're going to be talking about something that really applies to the mental health of the pastor. Right?
Okay.
Going into it. And really it has more to do, we've talked about some goal setting stuff. We've talked about praying over your congregation. We want to talk about metrics like they don't matter to us.
Sure.
But we're heading into what I refer to as the gap, where the gap is like right before summer comes. We had our big resurrection Easter Sunday. Right? Everybody showed up to church and their grandmas, right? And all the little babies showed up to church for the first time.
Right.
We had a packed nursery and everybody was so excited. And now, you get that big buildup between Christmas Eve and Easter. And now you got Memorial Day and Mother's Day and Father's Day and 4th of July. And then, end of summer, people on their summer vacation. So we just had maybe the highest attendance that we'll have all year.
Right.
And now we're going into that low season. So what are some things that you do to keep you and your church focused during this time, during the time of the gap before people start coming back and getting back into their school routines?
Yeah. So we just honestly take it as an opportunity to plan and catch our breath.
Okay.
Right? Because typically, once November hits, to your point, you're running pretty hard until March or April. And so, you're executing really on the plan that you had in place, coming out of the previous summer, going into the fall. And so for a lot of folks, they're working and what they're doing is executing what they've already put together. But now it's almost time to start turning your face toward the next year. So from an organizational perspective, trying to catch our breath, let folks kind of cool out a little bit, revamp, reassess, what they were planning to do throughout this calendar year. Our church, we still on a calendar year, so we don't operate on the fiscal
Us
year.
either.
Yeah, so
we got away from it because it was so hard whenever we had to do like financial reporting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like I guess it made sense at one point in time, but as soon as we had the opportunity to reset, when we first started talking to the folks at our bank about, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and they're like, you need to fix your fiscal years because they're not going to run with ours, and it's gonna delay your process.
Yeah.
I'm like, crap.
And just from a general matter, most of our people are going to think on the calendar year. And so that creates its own kind of unique issues. So organizationally, that's what that's one of the things that we do from the congregation. They're tired too.
Oh, dude, yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, they need to go by the babbling brooks of rest and recuperation.
Yeah. Except for our youth pastors, because this is for the congregation as a whole. This is the gap, but for youth pastors, man, this is the launch.
That's right.
Because they got camps and mission trips and all of those kinds of things that they're working out.
And listen, don't forget about graduations.
Oh yeah, for sure.
At all levels, really. Especially.
Boy,
come on, man.
The elementary school graduations.
Stop.
That might be the biggest motivator for me to homeschool my kids is I do not need them going through 4th grade graduation.
That's it. Come on up here.
Nah.
Yeah, that's
it. You're done. Yep.
So just really, to refresh or remind everyone about, who we are as a church and why we're doing what we're doing, right? Some mission re-emphasis, right? That just kind of flashes back across everybody's minds. And so that's kind of what we do, just catch our breath, reassess.
Do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. Do your thing, right? Just get into the steady grind of just doing, the week to week or day to day kind of ministry stuff.
I do think it's important to have a thing to like refocus your people towards, right? Because it's tough seeing those knowing you had every seat full this Sunday,
I know it.
and then you go in next week and you're gonna have maybe 50%,
Yeah.
right? Because this is also one of the things they say that right now. It used to be that the average church member, not just the average church attender, the average church member attended one of every 3 Sundays,
Right.
right? So sometimes you have them once a month, sometimes you get them twice a month, depending on where that falls. Easter was sort of that convergence where everybody would come together, right? Mother's Day, we kind of have the same thing, right? Because with moms, they're like, "What do you want for Mother's Day? I just want my babies in church, right?"
My babies in church.
So those two, you'll have them. They're close enough together in 2025 when we're recording this that you might hit both of those where you get, hey, here's my 1 in 3, here's my 1 in 3,
Right.
and then you might have 9 to 12 weeks, after that where you're running, you're running 50% capacity or whatever. So what do you do personally to try to keep your head up and to try to keep yourself from falling into that, sort of like deflation mode?
Sure.
Right? Because it's way easy to get up whenever you're preaching in front of, a packed house or a mostly, packed thing that, people are excited. You get a little bit of excitement whenever you go there. You just can't help it.
Sure.
And then, going from that to the other, what do you do to make sure that your delivery and your effort is the same?
Is the same. Yeah, so I do a couple things, and this is going to sound maybe not as professionally astute and deep and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I know you mentioned metrics, but one of the things that I have noticed about our church is the attendance around, particularly Easter or Resurrection Sunday, as we like to refer to it. Tends to be an indicator about how the church will grow for the rest of the year, right? So it's almost kind of like as you're assessing capacity in your sanctuary, right? Is it comfortably empty? Is it comfortably full? Right? Are you at capacity? And how those numbers might affect psychologically people's perception of your ability to accommodate them, as an organization. Well, same way for us as it relates to our attendance on Resurrection Sunday. So let's say if last year we were, 75% full or close to, 90 or so, right? And then this year's a little bit higher. What we've seen is that steady increase year over year has kind of predicted how our church is going to grow. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm looking at the numbers saying, hey, okay, this gives me some sense of how things are kind of tracking. And so I look at that number as something to inspire me, right? Because let's just say for our conversation, you were at 400 and then, next week is going to be in the 220s, but you've got, our history has shown that we're growing towards that Resurrection Sunday number.
Gotcha.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
So there's this sense of anticipation of people coming back, whether it's the same folks that were there on Resurrection or different people, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I do. Now, I know this might be controversial for some folks.
Come on,
but
that'll get us some clicks.
No, it ain't. Hey, listen, we'll try. I know where. No, let me stop. So anyway, is this thing about online service, right? The live stream and all that. I'm preaching with the understanding that while the physical presence of the church, of the congregation may not be where it is, our pattern has been that sometimes more people are viewing either our live stream or treating it as an archival service that they watch over the next several days, right? And so psychologically, I'm saying, hey, okay, ego, chill out, right? It looks like 150 people right now, but in a couple days, at least another 100 people or 200 people are going to see this or some portion of it.
Right.
So you need to make sure you're taking care of your business. And I know, it's just something that I'm doing to kind of quote unquote psych myself out.
Right.
Right. But that's kind of what I do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing to help stay focused. And then, the catch all is, remember, it is about numbers, but not really. Right.
Yeah.
One is good enough, right? If
Yeah,
one
for
gets
sure.
saved, if one
Yep.
family joins, if one person gets baptized, I mean, it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, that's so difficult to remember sometimes. I know when I was doing music professionally, we had this. We would do dress rehearsals because one of the bands, we did a lot of stunts on stage. Like I would do a backflip, and then we had another thing where we had a guy that would like play the guitar solo like on my shoulders, and there was a bunch of different things that we did in order to kind of set ourselves apart in the music scene in the Dallas area, because there's so many bands that are playing. Particularly whenever we were coming up, there were a lot of bands that were in the same genre that we were in, and we wanted to do something to where people wanted to come to our shows.
Right.
The problem that we had, though, was that we would have a show where we brought out 1,000 people, and we made splitting with the door, maybe we're making $6,000-$7,000 that night.
Okay.
Which for a couple of 20-year-olds, right?
Hey,
we were
good
incredibly
living.
irresponsible
Yeah,
with that
that's
money,
good living.
right?
That was good living.
Yeah, like that's exactly right. We would have really nice dinners that were more expensive than what we should have eaten. We didn't save any of that stuff, but and then we would have nights where we would go to places that were a little outside of our like main hub, where we'd have 30 people show up. And we had to have the conversation of like, the 1,000 that we played for, they paid their $25 per ticket in order to get in there. The 30, they also paid $25 for their ticket, right? So we have to give them the same thing regardless. And in pastoral ministry, when we're preaching, like there's not that one-to-one comparison. Right? Like nobody's paying to come and watch us, because if that was the case, people would get refunds every week who come who come to my church, right?
That's right. Me too.
The premise though is the same. It's like whether it's 30 that are there, whether it's 1,000 that are there, our calling is to preach the word.
Yes.
Like to protect the truth and to preach the word. And if we're doing it, you said, doing it for the one, and the one ultimately is for God, right?
Sure.
Like being responsible and obedient with that calling. And one of the things, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the future, I'm sure, is the example that we set as pastors. And remembering that is one of the things that really motivates me. Because if I mail it in when we're at 25% capacity one week, when the week before we were at 110%, and people are like, oh, we better call the fire marshal, versus now where folks are like, do we even need to have church? Right. If the worship team is engaged, if the delivery of the sermon, that there isn't a hiccup, right? That it's obvious that I'm delivering in the same way. Well, your volunteers, your church people will see that and take that example, because there are going to be times when, there's 3 kids in the kids ministry, or in a Sunday school class, or maybe 2 people show up on Wednesday night, and the leaders of those things are going to want to say, it's not even worth it for us to do this. I spent all this time preparing, like, this is it, right? Our egos get that little bit of, we get that chip on our shoulder of like, why did I spend all this time doing this? This is the only 2 people that are here.
Right.
But if they have that pastoral example to lean on, where they're like, you know what, when we had, capacity on Easter Sunday, there were people here, but also when we were only 30% full 6 weeks later, right, pastor gave the same message. He did it with the same amount of enthusiasm, with the same, face towards God and all of that, that then becomes the culture of the church.
Sure.
Is really that do everything as unto the Lord.
That's it.
And that's it's a difficult thing to do, though.
It is. I mean, and that's that's kind of an integrity issue too.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you've got to decide why it is that you're doing it, right? if you're doing it for the accolades of the people, right, you've already got your reward, right?
Yeah. That's the Pharisees, right?
Exactly.
For fear of the people that they didn't do the stuff.
Yeah, right. And so, but I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said, listen, we do all things as unto the Lord, right? Because if nobody else shows up, he does.
Yeah.
100%. And he's the one audience that we're striving to impress or to satisfy or to render what's due him, because he's worth it, right?
100%, man. And it is, we'll have those moments. One of the things that I've noticed about this gap season, we talked a little bit about how Mother's Day is going to be a big day, right? Memorial Day, people travel, and that's normally they're like back to back almost. So you'll have another like, here's a big peak for Mother's Day. Everybody wants their babies in church, and then Memorial Day happens, and then everybody wants their babies on the lake,
that's right?
Or wherever they're at. Father's Day tends to be the opposite of Mother's Day. And
yes, indeed,
it's both in message, right, and in attendance. And I want to touch maybe here for a couple of minutes on this. Why do you think it is that dads are more likely to say, "Hey, no,
it's the Duke
this is my day,
that's it.
Right?
Nah,
we're gonna stay home."
That's
And, we're going to stay home and watch NASCAR or reruns of the Andy Griffith Show or whatever it is, that you want to do. Just sleep in and not do anything, right? Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it's probably, the dude factor. Generally speaking, most guys that I know just want, they want respect, right? They want, we tease our ladies. I'll give a quick story. So, at Antioch, they'll go all out for Mother's Day, right? And all the guys at the church are like, hey, when Father's Day comes around, don't skimp on the planning, and don't just bring some paper bags out here and try to pass it off as decorations, right?
Right.
And so, but generally speaking, most guys that I know, want to be respected. We want to be acknowledged. And I think most of us just kind of want the remote.
Yeah, for sure.
And
right.
I don't know why why that is in terms of certainly some deep spiritual reason. But I think just most guys are laid back and they want to be acknowledged. They want to eat and then they want to be left alone.
Yeah, there's something I think, especially with dads that have kids. Sunday morning becomes really stressful.
Oh my goodness, I remember those days.
And our kids are, for a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, really well behaved.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? They got their stuff. They're not afraid to bite something right now. It's like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the 2-year-old. He's got his 2-year-old molars coming in, and we got a new bed. It's one of those old cargo beds that I had when I was growing up, and so parents had it in the garage, and so we built it for him. And he's on there, and I came in the other day, and he's like, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, my teeth hurts. I'm like, we got 100 little rubber things for you to chew on. Why are you chewing on the bed?
Wood. Let me get it.
I don't know what's wrong with children. But it is, man. Even though they are still at an age where they respond really well to the things mom and dad ask them to do.
Right.
Get up, they get up. Go to the bathroom. There's not a lot of fighting there. Those kinds of things. But it's still stressful to try to get them ready and get them out of the house. I don't know the amount of times that we've been like close to getting out the door, and the kid will spit up on me or my wife, right? And so now we got to change clothes. Whenever they were babies. Now that we're potty training, it's we're all on the way out the door, and then there's just like this blood curdling scream, like one of them got tremendously hurt. No, I had an accident, so now we got to go and we got to change the deal with all that.
Yeah.
So it's stressful to try to get everybody out the door and manage and looking appropriate. And so there is something to that. I think, you talk about the laid back factor, the chill factor of like, if I can eliminate this, which is like this hour and a half, this 30 minutes to 90 minutes of incredible stress that we have on Sunday mornings. I'm
down for it.
Yeah. Like why would I want to deal with that? And one of the other things that I think comes into play, and I do want your opinion about this, is the sermon.
Okay.
Because okay, there it is. Now you know what I'm talking about. I said it at first. You're like, what? Right? Because on Mother's Day, we talk about how wonderful and precious mothers are, and how great and important they are in our lives. We tell stories about how beautiful Mary was, and she was chosen by God to mother this baby just like you were. And on Father's Day, we're like, hey, listen. You guys suck. You suck as men. You suck as church members. You suck as leaders of your homes. And if you don't get your act together, then our culture is going to hell in a handbasket. And the only person you have to thank for it is the person in the mirror.
Yeah.
Bless you and do better, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a factor of that, because I've had a couple of guys that I was like, we missed you on Father's Day. And they're like, well, if you want to beat me up, you can just do it any old day of the week. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So because it's funny because I was about to ask you that question.
Yeah.
So I'm just a contrarian when it comes to some of these holidays.
Yeah.
Right. Because all jokes aside, and I'm not trying to, poke the bear on here, but sometimes I think we become dangerously close to, creating these little idols, or at least
that Hallmark is dictating our sermons.
Yeah, man, exactly. Because I'm like, bro, I cannot preach another Mother's Day sermon. So I went through a period when Father's Day, Mother's Day, I was just preaching through a book, right? So I think I might have, let's say I'm preaching through John, and I wouldn't break my pattern, right? So it's Mother's Day, I say Happy Mother's Day. We might have a little, hey, that's it, man. Yeah. And then I pick up where I left off. And of course, you had particularly on Mother's Day, the brother on Father's Day, I'm like, hey, man, whatever.
Yeah, they're like, hey, good message. Or they're like, hey,
thank you for
just make sure we're out of here at noon.
That's it. Hey, I'm hungry.
yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. And so it was some pushback, man. But I kind of released myself out of that Hallmark prison, right?
Yeah.
To have to appease the folks who were coming, if you will, to satisfy their expectation. Because, I decided, it's worship, right? So we're not coming to glorify anybody, right, other than God, right?
Yeah.
So I just found myself being really sensitive to how the Spirit was leading me. And I preached Mother's Day sermons, but
okay, here we go.
If I preached a Mother's Day sermon, you better bet your bottom dollar I preached a Father's Day sermon that year.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because
like if you're gonna do it, you do both.
I have to do both because the fathers are already feeling slighted, right? With whatever it is, it's always second tier, right? Mothers, they get flowers and all this stuff. People are, fawning over themselves to be around moms. Then Father's Day, hey, take this Chico stick and you know what I'm saying, right? And some knockoff Kool-Aid, and we'll see you. Right? So so I had to make sure all this stuff was at least on par. I mean, but what about you, man? I mean, because that's a real thing, man.
Yeah, like, all right. So first off, there have been times where I've been guilty of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. But I tend to kind of fall into the same category as you, man. Is that like the majority of the time I'm just gonna preach through what I'm preaching through. Like we'll do it. We might get like some roses or something for the moms, just to like acknowledge it or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's sort of it. And I got a little bit. So I did this on. I've done this on Easter several times where I just like preach through what we're preaching through. And somebody's been like, oh, you didn't do a resurrection sermon. I was like, every Sunday ought to be a resurrection sermon. If you are not talking about the resurrection every Sunday, you're not doing your job.
Come on. Yeah.
And that's been received in a myriad of different ways.
It's been received.
That has been received.
Period.
People have received that. Yeah, but it's so important that, and I think that's something that a lot of, and maybe this is definitely a topic to dive into sometime later, is people reserve their resurrection sermons for Easter.
Yeah.
And so we got 50 weeks about the crucifixion, 1 week about the resurrection, and 1 week about the birth, and then everything else is about the crucifixion. Well, I'll tell you what, that 1 week is the most important week that you will ever have in your church.
Yeah.
Because the resurrection is it, and if you don't think it is, go read 1 Corinthians 15.
Seriously.
Yeah. But with the Father's Day stuff, I kind of do the same thing, right? The Mother's Day and Father's Day come around, that we'll preach whatever we're preaching through. And I do the same thing for man, I know some places, and there's a Babylon Bee article, bro, that gets me every year. They do some variation of it. That's like, 5 people accepted the United States of America into their heart for the 4th of July sermon at XYZ church. And look, we've got a lot of incredible veterans and service members who go to our church. And I am so thankful for every one of them. So thankful for the relationships that we have with our first responders and all of that. But I do not worship the nation that I was born in, right? It's all about Christ.
That's right.
I'm excited and happy to have the freedoms that we do,
for sure.
And
don't take it for granted.
Yeah,
we don't
so
take
very
it for granted.
thankful for all of them.
That's right.
But the pulpit is not a place, in my estimation, from what I'm reading in the scripture, where my job is not to protect the truth of the Constitution, is to protect the truth of Scripture.
That's right.
Even when the things in the nation are, and maybe especially when the things that are happening in our nation are opposed to what Scripture says.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah, but that's another one that I do get some pushback on. They're like, "Oh, we didn't do the Battle Hymn of the Republic." I'm like, "No, we sure didn't." You're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you noticed.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, that's it.
You saw that too. We did do that. I'm like, what in the world? But yeah, so there's some of those things, man, that I just, I grew up in some churches that did that. There was one in particular, man, that they had an American flag that I think, if you measure it like you did with the TV screens, that it's a 50-foot American flag that they would hang back there. And man, that's cool. But that American flag every year covered up the baptistry and the cross, and that never sat right with me. And that can't be it.
Listen, that's a whole nother episode.
That's
man.
That's my soapbox. I'm gonna hop off.
No, that's it.
That's it.
No, but I'm telling you, man. Just in terms of what messaging are we communicating, even in our decor and how we present things in the sanctuary.
Yeah,
and I'm not a prude on some things, and I'm not a stickler on. But I think it's important that we not look past the imagery and the metaphors and how we're communicating to those who come in attendance, even with how we decorate things.
Yeah, I do, man. It's important, I think, to acknowledge, particularly for Memorial Day, because you're going to have people in your family or in your church family that are grieving. For sure. Right? That have lost folks. And then on Veterans Day, you want to take some time to acknowledge the veterans. Indeed. Then, and pray for service members and stuff. I think that's great. But if that becomes the message, is the sacrifice of the American soldier and not the sacrifice of the Savior, then man, we've lost it. Yeah. So, and that's the same. And I think that's the same with respect to mothers and fathers. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's the same thing, right? So it's not that we picking a class or category to shine a bright light on, but I think it's the same. Yeah. And one of the things too that we've found over the years is if you're seeing these dips and they're affecting you, right, in the way that you're thinking about ministry and all those kinds of things, man, then do something for them, right? Yeah. Plan something around that, like, hey, you know what? We know Memorial Day is coming out. A lot of y'all are going to be out of town. That's awesome. If you're here, we're doing the cookout at the church. Sure. Right? That, we do that. We'll go down to go find, because in nearly every city there's some kind of campground or something. There's an Army Corps of Engineer, stuff where they've got little campgrounds that you can rent that are by the lake or whatever. Hey, you know what? That's what we're going to do. Bring your fishing poles. We're going to grill out over there, and everybody can hang out and do whatever. If that's a concern, then do it. But man, a lot of times those can be great opportunities to build relationships. Indeed. One year we had some leftover, like you remember the little ice, the little ice pops. Oh the little skinny. Oh yeah. We had some left over, and we were like, hey, why don't we just freeze these and just pass them out to people while they're leaving church? There you go. And man, it was awesome. And people were kind of hanging around and talking. Normally you got to hide all the babies out of the parking lot because people trying to run over each other to get out of there. But man, they were hanging around on campus. And so, it doesn't even have to be
extravagant,
Yeah.
right? It just needs to be something, or
Yeah.
can be something.
Yeah, we noticed that when the city does their 4th of July stuff, that our parking lot fills up because you can see the fireworks really well from our parking lot.
Okay. Yeah.
We noticed that one year that like we were doing the thing with the city, and we were like, all right, well, there's maybe 100 people that we saw, and then we drove by the church, and we're like, there's 150. There's people parking in the grass at the church to watch the fireworks. So why are we investing in this thing where we can just stay home and serve people, right?
Sure.
So we just started. We rented a cotton candy machine, and that's what we do now. You just come over and you get free cotton candy and hang out. We'll tell you a little bit about the church, and then fellowship with those folks. And you know what? Every now and then somebody comes up that was like, "Hey, no, we were here last night. We'd like to
come and see."
We decided we were going to check it out.
That's it.
Yeah, man, don't get discouraged in the gap. There are lots of things that you can do to focus on, and what it takes sometimes is an adjustment of our focus and remember what our mission is. So use it as time to plan to make ready for the next run, because it's coming, whether you're ready for it or not.
That's right.
Potentially use that Easter Sunday or that Mother's Day as a gauge for what the potential of your church could be. Use it as an encouragement. Those are the people who know that your church exists. Those are the people who you can impact. So the more information that you capture and the more opportunities that you have for follow-up for folks that are there, recognizing people at the grocery store and wherever they go, encouraging them to come back. Make sure no matter what, you're preaching the word constantly and consistently. And then for all those other holidays and stuff, maybe you do feel led to give that sermon, but stick to what the Lord has convicted you to do and see whether or not he might just bless you preaching his word versus the Hallmark cards. So, Dr. Respass, thanks, man.
Appreciate
you being
bro.
here in this conversation. I'm gonna take some of these notes back and give them to my secretary to type up and send that to my congregation to get your butts back in church. Dr. Respass said so.
Oh my gosh! Now you get me in trouble.
Then I can listen to this. But you guys, thanks for listening. Y'all have a good give, and we'll see you.
Holla.